Then welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Talk of the Empire. This edition with Mr. Cysion in the house. How are you doing, guys? They cannot hear me? Can I hear them?
I can hear you.
Ah,
Good evening.
There we go.
sweet stuff. So, yeah, finally we have you here, Cysion. For everyone who doesn't know him, he's a very, very special guy in the Age of Empires world, and we met for, I believe, the second or third time in August. And when we had the big meetup there with all the Age of Empires guy, the release party for Age of Empires DE, and I took him to the side and told him, Cysion, if it wasn't for you, no one would be here today. Cysion, explain. What did I mean with that? Who are you?
Okay, so let's say 5 years ago, I think in 2012, I started to work on a mod for Age of Empires 2, which was the Forgotten Empires, it was called back in the day. That got out of hand quite a bit, and more people joined the project. In the end, it got pretty popular with players as well. I think we had like 1 million downloads in, way too fast. Our website was instantly crashing from all the people who were trying to get it. And in the end, we managed to get in touch with Microsoft, and they were like, oh, this looks good. Let's make this official. Let's add this to the official series. And then we've made some more expansions for H2 after that. And then we also just released H1 DE, the definitive edition for the original Age of Empires game. So let's say it's things got quite out of hand working and playing around with Age of Empires.
You know, you saying about the website going down reminds me, because I remember on the launch day, I posted on Reddit Gaming about this mod, and so many people went to the website. You're like, why didn't you tell me you were going to do that?
Yes, I do remember that.
That was how many years ago now? That is a long time.
Oh, yes, indeed. Now we're more prepared for that. But still, now we use other channels to just distribute games, not through our own website anymore. No.
How did that work? From you programming your own Age of Empires thingy to getting contact to Microsoft and they thinking like, let's sell that stuff several million times?
Oh, Jesus. It's been a while, to be honest. It all really started with, we had the feeling like, okay, so many million people basically are interested in this mod. At the time, we knew that HD was coming. So we were like, come on, this is the perfect opportunity to reboot the series, to do a bit more with H2, and to make the most out of HD. And then basically our quest started, like, how would you get in touch with Microsoft? Like, if you think Microsoft, you think Bill Gates. Should we contact Bill Gates? No, probably not. That's not how it works. But who do you contact? I don't remember how we got to it in the end, but I think we went looking around on LinkedIn and then eventually found the guy who was kind of in charge of Age of Empires at the time. Don't think he's that the same guy anymore. But yeah, basically then we started. We sent him a message. I think it took 2 months before we got a reply. So that was also quite fun. And then we kind of just got the ball rolling, like, okay, how do we figure this out? Like, you got a mod, but making a mod an official part of the game is tricky. You have like, I think on the original mod, like everybody helped like a tiny little piece. You had a guy who made one icon. Okay, now we have to put that one icon in the game into an official capacity. Do we need a guy to sign over that one icon so we can actually use it and sell it? Yes, we do need to do that. And because some of the things we used were so old, like we're in the modding community for 10 years, we kind of had to go and find people who made a mod 10 years ago. Like, for example, there was actually an icon of the Gilnets technology. That was like part of a mod that was brought out, I don't know, 5 years ago. And we had to kind of go and find that guy and have him sign the rights to that little icon. That was actually quite challenging. part of it.
It all sounds very tedious if you had to go through, and I guess you ended up redoing a lot of the assets as well for the actual official
Oh
release.
yes,
Yeah.
indeed. It was redoing a lot. I think you actually remember this, Zach, when we made the the campaigns for the Forgotten. We tried to play around with voice acting, and I think you did some voice acting for that as well.
It got scrapped because it was rubbish.
Yeah, that was a little detail there. Yes, we scrapped it all in the end, but things like that, like all the campaigns were redone. We made a lot more campaigns in the end. A lot of the graphics were redone as well. I think we had a white Slavic set in the original game, and then we were like, okay, we need to properly model all these things. We can't just use cut and paste art anymore, which we actually had a lot of. Like it was quite amazing. Like people were modding individual units frame by frame to make them look different. Like usually if you go about making a unit, you model it and then you just render it out in every angle that you need. But some people were that passionate that they actually drew a shield on each individual frame, each individual angle, and actually made it look good, which was impressive.
Sick stuff. Yeah, that's where it all started, and now we are playing with the big boys, as it seems, right?
Yeah, it's weird because in a way we're still like community guys. We like to, I don't know. When we were at Gamescom, that was fun. It was like, yeah, we just like to hang out and play Age, right? And at the same time, you have a certain responsibility on the game as well. Like it's quite funny. A while back, I found an old post of myself on AOC Zone, and I was complaining about the balance in the game. I was like, oh no, we shouldn't change the balance. Like, let players figure out new tactics, whatever. And now, many years later, you kind of have that responsibility to make sure that the game is properly balanced. And people will come to you and knock on your door and say, like, hey, why is this not like this? Or why is this guy so strong? Or whatever. So that's definitely a change of perspective.
Yeah, we will talk about balancing later for sure. And now you're kind of head of the so-called Forgotten Empires, or a team. And what are they up to? What did they do the last 3 to 6 months?
Mainly working on H1DE. We released that, I believe, 2 weeks ago. And we've just been heads down into that one. There was no other time for anything else. Age of Empires games are so massive, so huge. Not just the games themselves, but the fan bases as well. You have people who are interested in making scenarios, making fun scenarios. You also have people who are just interested in making pretty scenarios, like treating the game like a city builder. You have people who like to play competitive. You have people who like to play comp stomps, beating up the AI in single player or multiplayer. And that's after 20 years, those communities, those respective communities kind of grew into very different directions of what they kind of expected of the game, what they want in the game, what they're looking for in the game. And those things you kind of have to cater to and kind of have to make sure, like, okay, is everybody who is playing Age of Empires in any capacity, are they served, are they pleasured with what we're making here?
Man, it's so tough. Like, the community is so huge. Obviously, I'm more of the like total only esports, only want to see racks of the top 100 player. Everything has to be balanced, super sharp, fair maps, great entertainment when it comes to action. But that's like, I'm not even 1% of the guys, of all of them who love this game, will buy this game, being passionate about it. And it's like such a big world around it. And yeah, maybe you can tell us something about your impressions on the AoE launch party, and how did you address all those different people?
I'll just start with how did we address like the different people in the community. First of all, everybody who likes to play SimCity and Age of Empires, who just likes to play make a pretty city out of it, they got a whole visual upgrade. We added a lot of objects in the scenario editor as well, so they can make prettier cities than ever before. So they absolutely got everything they wanted. Multiplayer people, that's kind of two bits really. One is, well, actually three. One is people who just want to play multiplayer. The first time we booted up H1, the original with disk, we got presented with three options, which was like serial connection, parallel connection, and then I think IP connection. And like two of those, I was like, what is this? Like, what is a serial connection? Do I need to get those old serial cables and somehow plug them into two computers and then they connect? I didn't know. So the first challenge really was to get multiplayer up and running. H1 was surprisingly different from H2 in that regard. So we did not really have something easy to fall back on. But yeah, we basically had to build the whole multiplayer infrastructure from scratch there. So then we got that up and running. Then we have to see that what you just mentioned, a balanced game. H1 was very, very rough. It was the first game in the series. We kind of still wanted to keep that roughness. Like, part of the charm of H1 is the craziness that you have a catapult and you can mow down an entire army if you don't pay attention, much like Siege in H2, but even worse. And not only on enemy units, but also on your own units, and probably even worse than H2. That we kind of wanted to keep, but on the other hand, we wanted to avoid that people would just make a siege and then, or a catapult, and then just win the game. So we sat together with what was left of the competitive community in H1, and we said, okay, where do we go from here? Where do we start? What do you guys want to change? Do you even want to change something? And that was a very, let's say, difficult exercise, because we don't only have the H1 pro players here in Europe, which we mainly reached out to, but we also have the massive community in Vietnam, where it is actually, they have like official tournaments, sponsored tournaments, people like 10,000s of people watching H1. It's shown on TVs, in bars, stuff like that. Like, I wouldn't say like football, but kind of.
I remember a while ago we saw it was Vietnam Game TV streaming on Twitch with like 12,000 viewers, and we were, whoa, hold on a minute, what's going on there? But you don't see that too often. I think it's a much more closed sort of community. You don't really hear or see too much of it outside of Vietnam, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for those people, it was actually very, very important that we kind of stuck to the game as much as possible. Like, this is the game that we like to play. This is the original game. I actually think most of them still play on the 1.0a patch, which is prior to the Rise of Rome expansion, even.
What?
So it's like, okay. And there you get it again. Like, you have those massive different communities that kind of got in their different directions. How do you kind of try to bring those together? Like, how can you make everybody happy? So yeah, we also had to really make sure that, okay, don't change too much, but on the other hand, change enough so people are interested again.
And I believe there's an option to put all the graphics back to how they were originally. For those that want to keep the authenticity, I guess that was a decision based off of what you've just said, sort of pleasing all the crowds, as many crowds as possible.
Yeah, indeed. So we have a classic mode, and that is the old graphics, and also like certain features are disabled if you play in the classic mode. So for example, I don't think you have gather points. I wouldn't say foreign receding, but definitely not gather points, intelligent villagers. Those are turned off in the classic mode. But things like hotkeys.
But can you play classic mode against new mode?
No, you can't, because there is a difference in features that are enabled and disabled.
So how would you say that the launch of DE went as a whole? Like how it was received? Are you happy with how the release went? Were there any hiccups or any problems that you've had to address since the game has been released?
There were hiccups, that for sure. One of the most annoying, of course, was people who could not launch the game. That was very unfortunate, because we, of course, before you launch a big game like that, you have it run, you have a beta period where you have 10,000 players coming in. and you kind of try to gather as much data as possible. And the crashes that we experienced during launch, we did not see in that capacity during the beta. So that was a massive surprise. So that was very tricky to handle. Like, okay, we have our whole test lab here at Microsoft. We have hundreds of configurations there. We couldn't repro any crashes there. We had a massive beta of 10,000 of people. And now we go live and we have people who can't play the game. That's like, whoa, okay, heads down. Let's try to get to that problem as we can. What we're doing, what we did initially was like reaching out to people like, you bought the game, you left us a bad review, and just contact them like, hey, can you send us your stack, your logs? Here's a list of things that you can try to resolve the issue, basically. So that was definitely a big one on there. And also there was an issue with AI attacking a bit too early. But that is also resolved internally as well. So whenever the next patch comes out, that will be fixed. And then hopefully most people will be playing the game as we intended it to be played.
Cool.
Sweet. How were your numbers, like viewer-wise, with the launch there?
Ooh, yeah, the launch event. So the Microsoft organized a launch event in New York, where they invited a bunch of Mixer streamers and then developers, and then they organized like a little tournament where they paired a Mixer streamer and a developer in teams of 2, and then play against each other. So it was all Mixer. So obviously it's still a growing platform compared to Twitch, and it is the view. I honestly, I haven't seen the stream yet. I don't know how the viewer numbers were.
Okay.
I was in it, but I haven't seen it yet. So
Yeah.
Microsoft was happy about it, so I can only assume that it went well.
How was the studio over there? Was it quite a nice sort of surrounding, and was it quite comfortable? And
yeah, it was nice. Like they had everything. Like they had a big room with a lot of TVs on the wall to kind of monitor everything. And to me, that's already a sign of like, okay, you know your shit, you know what you're doing. So yeah, free drinks, big cameras. I don't know what
Free
else.
drinks!
Oh,
Holy!
why didn't they invite us?
No
Holy
alcohol
moly!
though, so sorry.
Oh,
I should
fine.
switch to Mixer.
Well, there was alcohol at the free alcohol at the one in the Gersnitz in Cologne.
Yeah, but they're in Germany, so
So it has to be
different rules.
Okay, have you any idea how many copies were sold already?
Yes, I do, but I don't think I am allowed to share that. But
Okay.
it's okay.
Is the game being bought by people in Vietnam? That's, I think, a big question.
Yes, I think so if you buy a game on Steam, you have these things like regional pricing, where you can kind of say, okay, if you buy the game in Russia, it's $5. If you buy it in the United States, it's 20. I think in the Windows Store that was also added. I don't know when exactly, but it was definitely applied for H1, and especially to captivate that Vietnam audience, they lowered the price to, I don't know, I'm gonna say $5. And on top of that, I also heard something about Microsoft reaching out to the Vietnamese community to organize some events there as well to get people more involved there. Actually, it was a funny thing there because the way H1 in Vietnam is organized, they have corporate sponsors and all that stuff. And I heard something like some of those sponsors like tobacco companies and gambling, but those are things that Microsoft not necessarily wants to work with. So I don't know how they're going to sort that out, but that was an interesting one.
Yeah, it's a different culture over there, isn't it? It's completely okay. But Microsoft, if you ever work with Microsoft, it's like you cannot work with gambling partners, tobacco part, anything like that, anything at all. It's just no, you can't touch it.
Indeed.
So I heard that Microsoft were going to be sponsoring some events in Vietnam specifically with some prize money as well. Is that the case? I don't know.
That is also the latest I heard of it. So I think you summarized it perfectly, but I don't have any more details.
Fair enough. All right, and then what about the future of Age of Empires DE? How do you see the development continuing? Is it going to continue, or are you guys pretty happy with where it's at now, and we'll just have maybe some more bug fixes, and then that's it?
Yeah, we definitely need to have a patching period. That is for sure. We also have more features that are planned or were planned that are partially in the game but were disabled for launch. I can't really go into which ones they were, but of course, if you go into the forums, you see like which features are like often requested, and those are of course the features that we have had in mind for a long time as well, but for various reasons did not make it in for the release. I can already say like we're not gonna make it H2. This was actually something that was brought up a lot of times in the reviews, like, hey, this is not H2, but like we don't have gates, for example. That was one of the top requests. We don't have gates in H1. And I can already say we're not going to add gates in H1. I would love it. I absolutely hated the fact that I didn't have gates in H1 as a kid. But at the same time, it's kind of what H1 is about. It doesn't have that, how should I say it? It's very unforgiving if you play H1. If you have one cavalry guy lose in your economy, you better run. In H2, if you have a cavalry guy in your economy, you can either say with your villagers, okay, let's try to attack him. Let's go to our town center. Let's hide behind these walls. Like you have many, many options. In H1, it's like, okay, run or do something about it now. It's very, very unforgiving gameplay that we really want to keep, or we're going to piss off 200,000 Vietnamese players.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it is still a different game, and although it's the same franchise, it's still you can't make it's just going to be like Age of Empires 2 because that's the one that more people play in the rest of the world. It's just it doesn't work that way, obviously.
Yeah.
So, cool.
Okay, like the chat mainly is asking for stuff like rating system. Is that planned? Is that out of your question? Is it more like the competitive stuff or?
That is definitely one of the top requests. I can't really commit to an answer there, but it is a top request that we are very well aware of. Let's put it like that. Actually, a very interesting question I saw there for Will Work for Ice Cream. What's the difference between walkable farms and gates? Like why at one and not the other? That is a very good question, and it's actually the most how should I put it? These were the trickiest decisions to make throughout the development, like what is acceptable to change and what not. And basically, we had to go through it like, does it ruin the gameplay? It does change the gameplay. You can't make farm walls anymore. That was the bad side. If you watch the Vietnamese competitive community, they use their farms to wall off their economy, basically. On the plus side, you can now place them nicely around your village. It's much easier to create a village. And it's really on a case-by-case basis. If we measure those two things, like farm walling or much more convenient gameplay, in this case, we set much more convenient gameplay. And for the gates, we were like, indeed, it is much more convenient. But on the other hand, it completely warps the balance if you add gates. So that's kind of where it is. There is no straight answer to why certain feature is, but we went through them on a case-by-case basis. And we also talked to the competitive community or whatever is left of them to see like, hey, what do you think about those changes?
So outside of Vietnam, is there actually much of a competitive community, or is it basically just a very small number of people now?
It is quite small. It is quite small. I think I can't put numbers on it, but the Vietnamese community outnumbers whatever is left in the rest of the world by 10 to 1, I would say.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
At least on a competitive level. I mean, there's so many casual players in the rest of the world, but competitive-wise, it definitely did. Yeah.
Sick. It's like StarCraft 1 in Korea, right?
Yeah. Brood War is huge over there still, but StarCraft 2 never really got so big.
Yeah.
Oh.
Interesting.
Okay. Is there like, for me as a tournament organizer, host, watcher, how are the features when it comes to spectating tournament games? So is
Currently
there a
there is.
spectator function?
This is one of those things that are indeed like we know that a lot of players would want it. There has been work done on it, but it is not currently available in the game. But it is one of those features that I would say it's on our list, and I do think it might come in the future. But I can't really give a very clear answer there.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting.
Because like some people, like now the interest obviously is big. H1DE came out, and I got contacted by like German smaller sites companies, and they asked me, okay, we will do an Age of Empires event, you host that one, you comment that one, and we will give you some small prize money. And I said, like, I'm not 100% sure if that's going to work this way, how you figure it out.
Yeah.
I want you to do that. And it got tricky.
Because to be honest, we were looking at doing a Age 1DE tournament as well, and in the end, we decided not to because of the lack of spectator and these issues that around the sort of, I guess, the competitive scene. So, and also we didn't really know who the players are or where to get the idea of which players are good, since we don't have that ELO system yet.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, fair enough.
Qualifying tournaments, isn't that an option?
Yeah, but.
Random seeding.
So much work.
Well, just do like round of 128, let them play down to 8 or something, then do a tournament with those 8.
Sounds like you got it figured out. Maybe you should do it after all.
You should ask me. Well, that's what we every single talk of the Empire. We have one part where you have a question. I will like, isn't that an easy solution? And you said like, oh, really, I should ask you more often. Then we don't talk for a month, and then next talk of Empires, same thing over again.
Every time.
Ay. Okay, now make me happy. Give me some infos. Age of Empires 2 DE. Cysion. Give me something.
I really can't give a lot there. Mainly because I don't think there has been official communication around H2DE apart from the Age of Empires event at Gamescom. There it was announced that it was coming, but besides that, there has not been any official statement, and I'm not the guy to make those official statements. So
okay.
I'm very, very sorry.
Then let's talk about something completely different. Where do you see yourself in the next 6 months?
Oh, right. So, well, besides H1 patchwork, we obviously are not stopping with working on strategy games. There is definitely an expectation from the community that FE will be involved with H2DE to an extent. I don't think that's a wrong assumption. But I just can't commit to any answer there. Other than that, besides Age of Empires, we definitely want to do other things as well, other strategy games, but that is those are definitely topics for later stages. I can't really give you a lot here.
To talk about DE, actually, I know that some people from Microsoft reached out to a lot of people in the Age of Empires community asking for feature lists that they would like to see should DE come up, have like, let's say you can have anything you want in DE. That's what we said. Give us everything that you would want to see in the game. And I know myself, Giant Apple, and a few others gave very, very big lists of, okay, this would be the perfect version of Age of Empires in our opinions. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that says anything about the scale of the project or whether they're just trying to prioritize features. But I mean, I would hope that they would try and do something very special with DE, because obviously we've already had the HD edition. And I'm interested in your opinion on this, Cysion, because obviously you were involved in the HD edition quite a lot and you know where the shortcomings are. What do you think Microsoft's approach to DE is going to be?
Well, it once again goes back to like, how can you make sure that everybody who's in the community will be satisfied with ADE? Just speaking for the competitive community, because I think that's you guys, that's everybody who's viewing now is more of the competitive community. Everybody who is in casual player modes will already be super happy with fancy new graphics, better sounds, like campaigns a bit refreshed, those kind of things. The competitive community, of course, wants to have a how should I say it, a smoothly running game. That is number one priority. It needs to run baby smooth. As the multiplayer experience, if there's any hitches there, we all remember the launch of HD, the Doubt versus
we remember that one.
We all remember that one.
Yeah.
So that will be number one. And other than that, here's the funny thing about something like DE. Age of Empires 2 has had community support in so many ways for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now somehow DE needs to satisfy all those things in one.
Yeah.
And that is a big challenge. That's a big challenge. But I definitely know that Microsoft likes to reach out to the community and ask, like, hey, what do you guys want to see? But at that point, it's a matter of, okay, what do we prioritize here? Because you can't do all of it. You can't mimic 20 years of work in various stages of the community and condense it into a, I don't know, 1 or 2 year project. That is just, that is not possible unless they're going to throw way too much money at it. But
yeah, I mean, at some point they have to, I guess, draw a line in the sand there with investment, right? I mean,
absolutely.
H2 HD is obviously done very well, but I can't imagine that DE would, if you own HD edition and you own the CD version of the game, surely DE is not going to be a full price game if you own HD. I can't imagine them selling the game at a full price again. Because they already lost a lot of trust from people with HD edition, and even now HD edition isn't perfect. So, I think there's it's difficult with that, and so they know that they're not going to. If they do take that approach, obviously they know that the amount of profit is going to be a lot less due to that. So does that then limit how much they're investing into it? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean, I just hope that they really try and knock the ball out of the park with it, because otherwise, what's the point?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I look at what we initially had in mind for H1DE and then see what we eventually made, there's a big delta between those two. And for the better, by the way. And just, where was I going with this point? I just had a compliment from somebody in the chat. I say I'm very well spoken, and now I lose track of it.
Now he's blushing.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But
Zach, do you think that if you own the Steam version, the Microsoft Store will be cheaper?
I believe that, because I think it makes sense for that to be the way it is.
But
because they did it with Minecraft, there was some update with Minecraft, and obviously, Microsoft bought Minecraft a couple of years ago, and if you already owned the game, you could get this update for I think it was a small amount of money, and if you bought it obviously new, you would pay the full price.
Okay.
But I'm interested on your opinion. So maybe you can't tell exactly what you think, but Windows Store has been a source of controversy for a long time, and a lot of people are saying, well, if it's not on Steam, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to upgrade to Windows 10 to buy it. Can you speak of your own personal opinion on the Windows Store and where you think it will go? Do you think they're going to stick to their guns on that?
There was an interview with Jörg Neumann, who is, I think, I don't know his official title, but basically he's the guy in charge for all things Age of Empires. There are some people above him as well, but he's
looks pretty high up.
Yeah, pretty high up. Let's put it like that. He did an interview a while back about Age of Empires, and the store, Windows Store, Microsoft Store, or Steam, and how to handle that. And I think he basically said like there is a certain disagreement with Steam regarding UWP support, and if that comes to Steam, then Age of Empires can come to Steam again. And I think that's kind of the gist there. Like, I think it's totally possible that it will come there, but that is a discussion between those two parties, I'm afraid. Not something I can influence.
I mean, that kind of makes sense, because I can see. So basically, my take on this is Microsoft has had a pretty bad relationship or bad connection to the community for a long time. Obviously, after Zone support stopped, there was nothing, right? And if they want to build a good connection to their community, which is important for every game developer to do, in terms of being in touch with them to get feedback, being in touch with them to just know what they want, to communicate with them about new releases, promotions, all this stuff. It seems to make sense that they want everybody on one platform playing together. And it seems like, well, Windows Store might be their way of doing that. You have your friends on Xbox Live, and you see them all there, and then you can play Age 1, 2, 3, DE, and I assume Age of Empires 4 as well, all in the same place. That seems to be the approach, but obviously Steam is huge, and it seems crazy to just sort of ignore it.
Yes, indeed. And I think that's what the interview with York, and I think it was GameStar, but don't quote me on that one, was about. Like, it is there, it is huge, but there will need to be some sort of approach or an agreement, a compromise of some sort between those parties involved before it can happen.
Fair enough.
Interesting. Yeah, it is an interesting approach. And from the impression that we got in Cologne, I feel they want to make it huge.
Yeah.
And want to hook a lot of people over at Microsoft. So or at the Microsoft store.
Were you Nilly in Cologne? Were you with us when we went out? There's a big group. We were in a pub somewhere, and there was the FE guys. There was some of the people from Microsoft. There was me. I think T90 was there.
I was sitting right next to you.
I don't remember. What can I say? We probably had too many beers. But
which one? This at the Gaffel House or at the Fruh House?
One of those places.
Okay.
I don't know. But I do remember one of the guys from Microsoft saying quite loudly to everyone, like, we want to make this really good, like DE. And they seemed very honest about that, you know. I just hope they manage to pull it off, really. That's all I hope for.
Yeah, there is definitely that going on. Like, they want to make it as big as possible. There are just like, how do you handle the Steam store situation, stuff like that. But within what the team is capable of, yes, that's absolutely intense. I mean, if they announced H4, right? That's what this is all about. It's H4 is coming, so Age of Empires need to shine again, basically. So obviously it needs to be all be good.
Yeah. How was the mood in New York? Like, was it more like, let's promote this, make it big, or was it more like, we have to give out the best product that we can, or do we want to reach out to most people so that we are a bigger name? What was their main goal?
Oh, good question. I think it's a bit of a mix there. Like, of course you want. I think it's really a, how should I say it? Like building up towards more. That's I think how I can best describe it. Like, this is the first time they're doing events like that for Age of Empires. And of course, we start with H1. We were just following the series chronologically, and it's building up. Now we have H1, then we have H2, which will obviously be a massive one. This is going to be H3, however that will go. And then, no, don't get me wrong, I love H3, but I know that it is sometimes not as well received by the general H player base. And then H4, whatever that will turn out to be as well. Yeah. So yeah, it's really like we're at the beginning of something. I was also happy because for us it was also we're at the end of something. We finally got H1 out of the door. Those projects really take years of your life. I mean, physically, like it drains you mentally and physically.
So
Those kind of games.
when did H1DE start? When did you start work on it?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Let me think. I think in summer of 2000. Wait, what year are we? 2018. So we started in summer of 2016, I would say. Let's say late summer we started gearing up and spill.
Okay. So doing a little bit of nilly math here.
1.5 years.
If when are we expecting H2DE then? In that case, if it took you 2 years or 1.5 years to get to this point for H1, what's the expectation for H2?
2019.
We don't know.
And then from that, then what about H3? I mean, by the time we get to H3, are we in like 2020, 2021? When's H4 then? Is that 2025? What's the timeline for all this?
I don't think we have to think about it like that. No, when I say like summer 2016, we didn't have a full team working on it. At that point, it was still really like figuring out how do we reboot the whole series, right? Like, how do you make the DEs? How do you, first of all, like this was the first time any of the age games comes to UWP. Like, how do you approach that? So it's not necessarily that those full 2 years are needed for each project and that they will happen one after the other. So
yeah.
I don't think the maths add up like that.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait till 2025 for H4, so that'll be nice.
It will be in our lifetimes, yes.
Yeah, well, I hope so. All right. So we've spoken a bit about H2D. Do you have any more questions about H2D? Nilly, maybe from the chat, some more opinions? I mean, I don't think Cysion really has any answers necessarily at this stage.
I had one more info about Age of Empires 3. Obviously, most of us hate it, but Joe, the community manager, said to me they want to put a lot of effort in Age of Empires 3DE as well, because they know it's the most broken game. And they feel like if they can really deliver on that one, the trust will just be enormous. Because if they can fix this, everyone has a lot of trust and believes that Microsoft can deliver when it comes to H4 as well.
I mean, I see the point, but I don't know. I mean, you're going to potentially alienate your existing H3 fan base by changing it too much.
Is there a fan base? Like, how many people are playing Age of Empires 3?
There are a decent number.
There is a fan base, yes. And I think that a lot of the, I would say, inconveniences in H3 can be addressed without necessarily upsetting the existing fan base. Like one of the things that this part I absolutely hate in H3, and that's the leveling up system. Like you have those home cities, you need to level them up, you need to grind games, you need to make a specific profile for each civilization you want to play with and level them up individually to kind of play at full power. At the time, it was, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but it was a fresh idea, and now we just call it grinding. And that's what it is. If they can just tear that out, a lot of people will already be very, very happy. But there are, of course, things like a lot of people were at the time upset, like, oh, it's H2, like the guns, the gunpowder thingy. It feels weird. Like I have a guy here and a guy there, and they both have a gun and they shoot at each other. And somehow the guy with this gun counters the guy with the other gun. It doesn't feel right. Like if you see a pikeman and it's knight, you know that the pikeman will beat the knight. That's how it works. If you have your gun against a gun, it's weird that one gun is so much stronger than the other. Like how do you have a recognizable rock, paper, scissors system with guns? And that I absolutely understand. And I don't think that is something they can really take away without completely changing the game.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. So yeah, I don't know about H3 really. I think that H2 should be the focus, in my opinion. And I'm not just saying that because of personal bias, but I think it's because it's the biggest game with the most fan base, and if you get that completely right, I think that's how you're going to gain the most trust from the community. Rather than Age 3, which is okay, yeah, it's still going to be done, but I don't think it needs to be the focus, let's say.
I also have to say, like, for all the hate that H3 sometimes gets, like, I think it's a really fine game. It's a really fun game, and the campaigns, especially in the Asian Dynasties expansions, are really, really, really good. And probably more than people like to give it credit for. But I would even almost say like some of the favorite campaigns in the whole series, or in Asian Dynasties in H3. So
I would agree with you on that. I did love the campaigns. It's just the multiplayer was where the issues were for me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
it is a very different game. Like the whole home card system, home city system, and then playing with the guards. Like it is fun, but it makes it very different. It's less about building up a nice city. Like even if you see the Viper or whatever play, they build a city. Like you see an empire grow. In H3, you don't see that growth of an empire. You see a very, very efficient city with like 3-4 buildings, and then you pump out cards from your home city, and that feels different.
That's kind of how it was, though. I mean, because we're talking about colonialism, where you're in a foreign land, you're starting with outposts, you're getting deliveries sent in.
Absolutely.
You're not building up a city in like London or like Amsterdam. That's not the game. So I mean, it just feels different, and it is weird. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
But it makes sense. That's the thing.
It does make a lot of sense. Like design wise, it's good. It's just not the age of empires that people were used to from 1 and 2. And if you change those concepts too much, then people get upset. Of course, naturally.
Of course. So I think we should move on to talk about H2 HD balancing, which you are responsible for. So tell us why.
Okay, give it to me. What's wrong?
No. That's not how it works. Just in general, like obviously you're getting mass amount of input on all the forums. Everyone is complaining. Reddit, every time Indians win a tournament, everyone is speaking, how can it be so imbalanced? I'm angry now. My life sucks because Indian villagers are too cheap. Like, what is your process when you know, okay, we are looking to bring out a patch in the next 3 months? What's your process to get, what are you focusing on?
Okay, so first of all, the most valuable input that you can have is competitive
Reddit.
games.
Okay.
Yeah, damn it. They're in there as well, but I'll talk about those guys later. Is competitive games. Like if you can see a competitive game between Viper and Tato, like two really good players. They play on a fair map with some of the new civs. You can really see like, does this work out the way we intended the civs to be played and the units to be used? Can we see that, for example, camels still counter knights? Stupid stuff like that. But it's very important that we see those things. Like what happens, for example, if the Indians go to the Imperial Age? They have this bonus to get there faster, which was the idea because they have this massive late game stronghold, super strong army. They have the elephant archers, the Imperial camels. Does that all work out? And then we see competitive games, and then we see, for example, but if people play Indians, they just try to boom as quickly as possible, and then they go arbalests, and then they have a massive spike in early Imperial, and they kind of roll over the enemy. And at that point, we were like, okay, we might have to reconsider giving arbalests to Indians. Like, would that change the way they are played? Was this a necessary part of their post-Imperial combination? The answer to all of that was no. It doesn't change them too much. It was not a necessary part of them. And it actually evens out that massive power spike that they would otherwise have in the early Imperial Age. So we removed that. And that was actually a relatively easy decision. Let's put it like that. Aside from competitive games, you also have whatever people say in the community. And with that, I mean Reddit and the Steam forums and AOC Zone. Well, now it's AoE Zone. Basically anywhere where people can give feedback. And it is also important to read those. And the reason is that in the end, balance is made for top players. If it works at the top player level, it will also work at the lower level. But at the same time, it needs to stay fun. And for 99% of the players, the balance changes we make don't really matter that much, if at all. And for them, it's more important, like, what is fun? And a lot of the times we see balance feedback on Reddit and stuff. It's more like, oh, I go to the very, very late game and all I make is elephants, for example, or elephant archers. And I completely obliterate my friend who only plays with the Vikings and likes to make pikemen. Like, yeah, that's intended.
Yeah.
But we have to keep that in mind as well. Like, whatever we make there, is it still fun to play in other scenarios? I'm trying to find a very good example here, but I can't come up with it straight away. I'll probably come back to it later. It will come.
Okay. Maybe something that goes into your direction is monks are still having a random factor when it comes to converting. For like competitive game, obviously a set amount of time for conversion would be like decreasing the random factor, so that would be good. But for the overall people, I believe having a bit of randomness there when it comes to conversion is actually good.
Yeah, there is a randomness factor in Age of Empires, but that is also what the whole game is about.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, or the most popular mode is random map. And what's in the name? It's a random map. You can have forward gold, you can have back golds, you can have all those sorts of combinations. Just at the map generation, a lot of the game is already, I wouldn't say decided, but like the dice are thrown. Like, here it is. And the random factor of wolf placement, conversion times, indeed, it's in a hyper competitive game like StarCraft, that would be trickier to have, but in Age, it's welcome, I would say. Even though I absolutely hate wolves. At one point, I was like, I want to remove these guys from the game. I don't think people would have thanked us for that.
But if, like, in my wildest dreams, when Age of Empires 2DE comes out and Microsoft is interested in making it big, and we have like Microsoft support, they go crazy, want to have it as a big esports title or something, there kind of needs to be a step to make it more viable so that the better player wins more often than he does at the moment, right?
Is that not already the case?
Well, obviously the better player is more winning more often than not, but yes, there's like a very relevant luck factor that like Leary cannot win against the Viper. Like we had in KOTD, an unfair map. It was a map win. Everyone agreed on that.
Yeah.
And that's something that like is taking a lot of wind out of our sails if we want to go into like the super important big tournaments, right?
Yeah, that is a very, very fair assessment, actually. If you look at the random map scripts, I think Arena is like perfect one, just because it's my favorite map as well, so I probably can talk about it the best.
Which one?
Arena.
Yeah.
There's now Master of the Arena, I think, so perfect opportunity to talk about that one. If you look at the map generation there, the board distance of on an Arena map is somewhere between, I don't know, let's say 8 and 10 tiles. It varies per board, per player, between 8 and 10 tiles, but it's never the same. So it's possible that it is outside of your roles, it's inside your roles. Those are, in a competitive environment, I would say very, very big changes, things that could decide the fate of the game. Those things you can change. You can say, okay, boars are from now on always at 7 tiles, for example. They're easier to lure. There's I wouldn't say no luck factor, but at least a very minimal luck factor. And they would never appear outside your walls. Those are changes that you can make. On the other hand, things like gold positioning, those are a bit trickier. I remember for a while we also were thinking about like, hey, can we make something like symmetrical maps? Like we generate half of the map, we copy it over to the other half, and players have absolutely the same guns to play with. It's quite funny, but that also had a slight, an ever so slightly balancing effect, because then civilizations with scouting bonus would kind of lose a bit of their shine. It's a very small thing, but also something to keep into consideration. But in the end,
But also, once you know your map, you know their map.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I mean that's something for both players, of course. But it would negate the Mongol scouting bonus completely. I wouldn't, no, not completely. Sorry, not completely, but it would negate it partially. Those are small things, of course, but I don't know if also that's what players necessarily want. I understand that it is absolutely necessary from a very competitive point of view. Like if players play with the same weapons and with the same map, there is no such thing as a map win anymore. But I don't know.
I personally think that random maps are a huge thing for Age of Empires. I mean, it's not StarCraft 2. The games have taken a very different approach in how they were designed. StarCraft 2 was designed with esports in mind, and it was designed to be very highly competitive on a sort of micro scale, with controlling your units, and it's less about the macro management, your economy. Age of Empires 2 is obviously a lot more economy based. It has 2 more resources. The resource spawns are random, but I like the randomness because it does just add that. Okay, yes, sometimes it can be unfair, but more often than not, it does give a quite rounded game, I think. But I think really the question has to go to the players and get their consensus rather than sort of saying, oh, okay, we should just make it like that with symmetrical maps or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whatever would happen there, I mean, something like symmetrical map would absolutely be an optional thing and not be forced down every game. That would upset way too many casual players, for sure.
Interesting stuff. Okay, then give me your input. What are the units or things about Age of Empires 2 at the moment that need the most fixing?
Ooh, I think the last balance changes went out a few months ago.
Not that long. 5.7, right?
5.7, yes. There were a few things on that list already that we thought like, okay, let's see what the future brings. Basically, the way we have our balance changes is that
6 weeks.
Okay, so before a next patch goes out, we already have our list ready for the one after that, basically. Some of the changes that went in now, we basically knew since the release of Rise of the Rajas. Like, this might be a change that is necessary in the future, but let's kind of see how things turn out to be. Perfect example of that is the condottiero. How do people use the condottiero? After a while, we noticed like, okay, we kind of intended it to be an early game champion that withstands gunpowder. And in the end, we saw that people would just abuse that, especially in water maps. Like, here's a unit without any upgrades. It's quite resistant to arrow fire as well. Drop it at the enemy island and you win the game. And I was like, yeah, that's not really how it should work. Because we kind of designed it both ways. We wanted to make it like an early champ unit and at the same time an anti-gunpowder unit. And that was just too much in one unit. So now it's more of an anti-gunpowder unit without the champion thingy. Other than that, especially units that are new to the game, those are always interesting. The best example is the Vitória for the Portuguese. Like something that generates resources out of thin air is always like that's completely new. That's completely new to Age of Empires. Like, how do you balance that properly? What equivalent? Like it costs now 20 population. Can you make an equivalent? How should I phrase it in English? Sorry. If you have 20 villagers and you put them to work,
yeah,
can I make the equivalent for that in a Vitória? And if so, what is the balance for that? And because we had no example to go by, that was very, very tricky. We had a relic to go by. That also makes resources out of thin air, but you can't really make it an equivalent of a relic that was way too strong. And there are also many like situations where the Vittoria can be used or can't be used. Like, oh, we're running out of stone. Let's pop down some Vittorias and have infinite bomber towers for the rest of the game, which was very popular at the beginning when African Kingdoms was released. But yeah, that didn't work out properly. Those are definitely the ones that need the most attention.
I personally love Porgies, and I believe there was only one game ever where I was planning to build one. Because that was a deathmatch scenario, team islands. I knew it's easy to run out of wood and all resources. So I wanted to build 3. That was part of my strategy. Game ended before that, so it never happened. So that kind of feels underpowered at the moment.
Yeah, it has been, I would say, the most difficult unit to balance. But on the other hand, it was such an interesting one to play around with. And also, this is also very important when we make up bonuses and stuff and new units, new buildings. Like, is it appealing to casual players? A unit like, for example, the Arambai, which is quite popular with expert players, it doesn't really appeal to casuals. It's like, oh, it's a guy, a ranged unit. Like when I was a kid, for example, and I played with the Mangudai or the what's it called, the Mamluk, I was like, yeah, okay, this is not really what I like. I like a big chunky dude that can run around the battlefield and soak up all the damage. That was kind of my favorite way of playing the game. And playing with a Mangudai or a Mameluke, I was like, meh. And same with the Arambai. I was like, yeah, this doesn't do anything for me. And we saw that a lot during beta feedback as well. And that is the big reason why we have the Vittoria in the game. Like, it's lovely for every casual player. They're like, oh, I can make a Vittoria and I get stone for free and gold for free. And they love it. So that's one of the big reasons that we absolutely had to get it in and keep it in and make sure it was balanced.
Yeah. So as you already mentioned, the Arambai, it's probably one of the most hated units at the moment. It feels most unbalanced in the top 100. What are your thoughts on the Arambai on competitive level?
Yeah, it's a very, very tricky unit. Like every ranged unit with high mobility probably ranks amongst the top units in the game in general. We have the Hunnic Cavalry Archers, which we've all seen thousands of in our lifetimes already. We have the Mangudai, we have the Plumed Archer, and now we have the Arambai in the same category. And even though we try to make it more fickle, like it should die a bit faster, unlike what's it called? Plumed Archer. I hate those units. They don't die to anything. They have the same agility as every other unit. They just don't die. Anyways, Arambai. It comes in the same category as all those very, very popular units. And we will address it, but it's very, very tricky with those units to make it too weak. And a perfect example of that is the Cavalry Archer. It's almost useless in every civ except for the hunts. And we want to avoid that with the Burmese as well. Like, how can we make sure that the unit is still strong enough? But there is this very, very fine line where it comes from being too strong to good enough to absolutely useless. And that hitting that point might take a few more balance patches.
Okay. Is there an option for you to create like a Skype group or whatever organization form you want with like the top 15, top 20 player who are willing to give feedback on those things?
That is actually not a bad idea.
For example, like the Viper is super vocal. We have Nikov writing a lot on the old AOC zone. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts and would love to give their input.
Yeah. So when we had the we're talking about balance, and I see so many balance suggestions in the chat already.
Yeah, no, don't care about the chat. We have 80% from Reddit over here today.
All right. So
not really.
when we did the beta for Rise of the Rajas, one of the things we did was having inviting a lot of players, and I believe that Viper and Dato and all those guys were also in there giving feedback. I think that Skype group is still alive; it's just not used anymore.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I am definitely for that, to be honest. And I think also as H2 DE comes around, that there will be an outreach there to make sure that whatever DE does balance-wise will take that feedback from the expert community.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much we can do, right? Like we do play balance games, we do test our own things, we have test cases, we have like the intended designs of each unit in mind, but nothing beats having extremely good players giving feedback there. So yeah.
And obviously, like, Zach, go ahead.
I was going to say, how valuable have tournaments been to you? So, Battle of Africa is coming up. Will you be looking at that for potential balance ideas and seeing how that works?
Absolutely. It is like the top one most valuable way to get feedback. You can see the games. We can watch the recorded games afterwards as well, to kind of see like, hey, what went on there. Almost everybody on our team just loves the game, so they just watch those streams as well, and they kind of get that feedback in our balance chat. It's like the best thing you can have, basically.
There was a lot, like, especially like the 5.7 was, at least when I was talking to like 4 or 5 different people that are top experts, you addressed the right units, but not the right way. That's how we felt. Like, I personally would have loved another change for the Condottiero. I would have loved another change for the Camels. I would have loved another change for the Rambai. And it kind of felt like you knew what the problem was, but the last idea was missing. And a lot of people like are aching. Like, think about it. Like the other crazy guys like me, we are sitting 5 to 15 hours a day in front of our PC and looking at flying darts of a Rambais.
Yeah.
So, and like seeing it all in like different situations, the typical guy only loses against the Rambai once and posts, yeah, they suck.
Yes.
Please nerf. But I think a lot of people would love to give like very high value input in that as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree there at all. Like the beta groups that we had in the past were very, very valuable. Setting something like that up or getting something going like that for whenever H2DE comes around will be extremely valuable. Now, the funny thing that you brought up is like, I do remember this happening. This happens the whole time, right? People give suggestions. We try to implement them, we play around with it, and we see like, okay, this does not necessarily work out. What I'm talking about now is if I go back to when we were working on the Forgotten Empires mod, we also had top players playing around with the new changes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember there was a change to, I would say, camels. And everybody was saying, like, you have to do this with camels, you have to do this with camels. And we did that with camels. And then they played the game with camels and it was completely broken. So you always have to be super, super cautious with that. And it's mainly that cautiousness that we want to keep. Like, we really listen to what you say, what the suggestions are. But usually I'm like, okay, this is against the intended design, or this is not how. Like, if we do that, other scenarios would break, other counters, other rock, paper, scissors systems would break, and then we need to find another way around it. And that's usually what you would see. Like, you say, okay, Condottiero or OP, fair enough, totally agree with that. We go around it, we have another way of addressing it. It's not the same as you would address it. Or as the Viper would address it, or as Tato, or many other people. But it is a way to address it. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, we'll need to see the next one. But it's also what I said before. Like it's super tricky the way the balance works in H. That just making a change of like one attack point or one defense point can completely throw around the balance, and that is something I'm very cautious about. And that's just the way H works. If you look at H2, it's with absolute points. Like you have 4 defense points, 4 attack points. If you have, then you just do 1 damage. If you do all of a sudden do, or let's say 4 and 5, if all of a sudden you do 4 and 6, you doubled the damage output you do. And with those things, you can massively upset balance. And that's why in H, the thing I said before, like you have OP, normal, and underpowered in such a small range.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're taking the absolute right approach to first start off with a bit too strong, because we need to see the units. We need to see them used. We need to figure out the balance. Instead of having a unit like, for example, the Ballista Elephant is now probably too weak to fight against other units. No one can ever talk about them. That's why they didn't get patched in all the other stuff, because no one's complaining about them.
Yes.
And
people tend to complain about overpowered units more than underpowered units.
Yes.
And I think with like, for example, the Condottiero, it's designed in a very particular idea, right? It's designed to fulfill a very niche role, let's say. You have to make it very good at that to be able to then see what needs to potentially change with it. And I think that's definitely the right approach for sure. I agree with you both. But it would be nice to potentially revamp that group and get people, experts, back into it to give their opinions as well.
Yeah, absolutely agree there. And I think for whenever DE comes around, that will be a very valuable lesson, especially because for DE, many people will be watching again, right? So you want to have the best impression as possible. So for sure.
Yeah,
okay. I just got to say, I'm going to have to leave, I'm afraid. I didn't foresee this, but I do have to go in a minute. So I'm going to just take my leave. But thank you, Cysion, for coming on and talking to us. Obviously, there's just a couple of topics left, so hopefully you don't mind, Nilly. I mean, I can stay if you really need me to, but I'm probably better if I go.
Well, it's our talk show, but well, okay.
I'm sorry.
But if you could please not hang up, if you just need to leave, because then I will need to reset up everything with the cameras. So just mute yourself, leave if you absolutely have to leave.
Okay, I'm sorry. But yeah, it was great to talk to you, Cysion, and you guys will continue your talk about balance and other stuff. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'll see you soon.
Thanks.
See you, Zach. Okay, so that was that. And what else I wanted to say? Like, if you have an underpowered unit and you lose a game, no one is super happy, because the one guy lost the game because of a weak unit and the other guy won and knows, well, the other guy couldn't really play to his full potential because he had only like that weak tool with him. But if you have like someone microing his Rambai well or Conquistadors well and the other guy being helpless, at least one guy feels great.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And this is actually how should I put it? Like every time a new expansion comes out, we see some comments like the new civs are overpowered just so they can sell more copies, and power creep and all that stuff. And that's not necessarily what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is make sure that they are strong enough. And thanks for Henry VIII. There's Zach. We want to make sure that the units are strong enough so people can actually use them and see how they work out. Like if a ballista elephant is super weak, like why would you use him? Like you'll use him a few times and then you will resort to whatever else the Khmer are good at. And that we absolutely want to avoid. Like all new units and all bonuses kind of need to be used. If you are trying to figure out a build order with the Malay or the Khmer, which are absolutely civs that require a change in build order, and you play against a guy who has been playing Huns or Mayans for 10 odd years, it's going to be an uphill battle from the start. So of course we need to make the new civilizations a tiny bit stronger to give you that edge to kind of play around and feel out, okay, what can I do with this civilization? What is strong? Because if we make it, I would say, balanced right from the start, the new cis will never have a chance.
And two things heavily applauding you for how well the balance is at the moment is, first of all, King of the Desert. How many different civilizations we had beating each other, how many different civilizations felt viable, and the professional scene at the moment is playing a lot of Arabia 1v1 with the random civilizations. And this feels really good. There are still like good civilizations and strong civilizations, and if I get like Indians, Malians, Incas or something, I still am happy, but there are not that many like, damn, I lost the game civilizations, like as we had with like AoC, when you had Saracens, you kind of knew you were done, or like what else was pretty bad. Franks was super bad there as well. And now it's all, it feels like you have really elevated the bottom 10.
I totally agree there. Like, it's lovely to see people playing random. Like, there's definitely room for improvement there. I think if you have Koreans and you're playing against the Mayans, you're still going to be like, oh, okay, that's challenging to say the least. But on the other hand, what I really, really like is when I see discussions about like what is the best civilization. And in the past, it was always like Huns, Mayans, Mongols, Vikings.
Aztecs.
Yeah. And Aztecs as well. And nowadays, I see way more variation in those top fives. And that is just very nice to see, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, as we saw, we had so many different first picks, so many different bands at the start with KOTD, and I was super happy. And now, obviously, for you, it will be super nice to see what will be the last civ as well, because we will have now 30 civilizations for Battle of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be surprised if there's like one clear weakest civilization that we won't see.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's a good question, actually. What would be the last civilization to be picked? I don't know the settings exactly, but
it's all land maps, 3v3. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe like Saracens could be weak.
Saracens I see being picked late. Probably Koreans, unless there's maybe a boom map.
Koreans are really good. Especially because if you go like 3v3, you have 66% equity of being flank, and they have a pretty strong tower rush.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Like, for example, Koreans feel pretty broken at the moment because they're like extremely one-dimensional at the moment. They aren't fun to play. Like, it's nice to have a tower rush and F someone up, but like the overall enjoyment to play against Koreans isn't great at the moment.
Yeah, tower rush is still my number one most hated strategy. I love to pull it off, but I hate to play against it. So can't have both, of course. And that's actually something that we try to do with the new civilizations as well, like making them broader. Like if you look at the Portuguese, like all units have a lower gold cost. That applies to all units. It's less dimensional, but it's very tricky to address the old civs in that way. If we look at, for example, the Goths, they're in a way one-dimensional. Like everything is focused on infantry, but on the other hand, they have perfectly adequate knights. They can do other things. Addressing something like Koreans would be tricky. Would be tricky there.
And they have like a lot of identity in their infantry as well. It's not like only cheaper champs and you always go for longswords, but the Huscar is also an interesting unit that kind of adds some value to the civ.
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it is infantry, but just saying that it's just infantry, there's so many types of infantry that they can field. That makes them definitely more. I would never categorize the Goths as a one-dimensional civ. Like if you look at it, sure, it's an infantry civ, but you can do so much with them.
Yeah, sweet stuff. So what is your next goal in the next balance pad?
Ooh, very, very good question. We definitely. I'm gonna pull up my list here.
Just post the next changes.
We have a balance changelog on our project wiki, which always lists like the things that we want to address. I'm quite sure that the errand buy is on there to see what we're going to do with that. Analyze like how does the condottiero work out now. I think we had some plausible changes for the Malians and Ethiopians as well, but I don't think we will do those necessarily. The funny thing about the Malians and the Ethiopians is that I always thought that the way they kind of shook out to be that they would be like the next completely OP civs. I'm happy to see that they aren't, but still a lot of people consider them top 5, I would say. So we have some changes pending there, but I don't think we are gonna integrate them shortly. Let's put it like that. Then there's also the weaker civs. I don't think we're gonna boost those too soon. So I don't think we're gonna see changes to the Turks or the Saracens anytime soon. The Vietnamese and the Khmer are another interesting one. Like the Khmer are, I don't know, like some people say they're very strong. I have the impression they're not super strong. Even if you play your cards right, they're very tricky and different to play. And the Vietnamese, yeah, they lack something early game. So yeah, we have a lot of things to think about, but I can't give a resolute example of like this we're definitely gonna put in, or this we're definitely not going to put in that I can't say for sure.
Yeah.
Or for certain.
Like Khmer obviously are super good in late imp if you have enough gold, and like
Yes.
one front fights. And Khmer, I think, haven't been really figured out yet, because how many times did I see like pop 18 scout rush or pop 18 double archery start or something? There are so many strategies that you can build around this civilization that haven't really been figured out yet. So I think let them get creative with it as well.
Yeah, that's why, for example, the Malay and the Khmer actually, we didn't want to change them that much. Like if you think about it, especially the Malay, like 80% faster. I think we nerfed that. It's not 80% anymore. Faster upgrade.
It was from 100 to 80 now.
Oh, okay, from 100 to 80. You're right. The goldless two-handed swordsman, infinite fishing trap.
They were champions before. I know. I played the balance patch with champions.
Oh yeah, that was in the beta, I think.
Yeah.
We did not release that.
Yeah.
There you see, it's very important to have good players in your beta to make sure stuff like that does not get in the actual game. But yeah, it's like, if you think about it, it sounds insane, but I wouldn't say Malaya are overpowered now, despite how good the bonuses sound. And I kind of want to do the same with Khmer. Like, hey, let's wait. You need to play that civilization differently, just like the Malay. Let's try to figure it out. And if we don't figure it out in due time, we might have to make some changes.
It's such a tiny thing. If Malay had +2 defense for horses, they would be civ number 1, I believe.
That is very possible.
That's so sick, because that's the one big problem for them, that they cannot really fight off in like crossbow mangonel masses with knights.
Yeah, that's true. Like we tried to kind of compensate for that with the cheaper elephants. But yeah, lacking the armor upgrades is always going to be tricky.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I think it's good that they have this lacking. Yeah.
Everybody needs a bit of a weakness somewhere. For the Malay, it's there, which is ironically the point where the most action usually goes on during the game or during a standard game.
It's so funny how like one little upgrade can be so important. Teutons, one of the, I believe, most underrated civilizations. Everyone hates to play them on the top level because they don't have husbandry. It's just such a small thing, but like if you're a pocket and always running behind your enemy pocket, and they have Persians with husbandry, it's just game deciding.
Yeah, and I do think like if you give Teutons bloodlines, it might
They
be
have
too much.
bloodlines. They have bloodlines.
Sorry, what?
Husbandry. The speed
Husbandry.
upgrade.
Sorry. Husbandry. Yeah, it might be too much. It might be too much.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. I think husbandry is a small enough tag that it could be arguable. But yeah.
It was really strengthen them. Okay, Cysion, then let's talk about it. You already said Age of Empires 2, you love to watch it, but obviously you have been super busy, didn't follow a lot of tournaments. Did you follow any of those? Are you looking to forward of any of those next tournaments?
I really want to, well, Arena is my favorite map, so I really want to catch up with like the good games that have been Master of Arena.
Yeah.
As well as catching finals. That would be lovely.
Can I spoiler you?
Nah. I haven't seen any spoilers actually. Like I'm in subreddits quite often. I go to AoE Zone quite often, but I just try to avoid all those things as much as possible. I'll catch up on streams when I can.
Okay, and then don't look at the stream now, because this guy is still waiting in the finals. And I believe this weekend we will have those two players playing against each other. And that should be interesting. Obviously, this guy is the big favorite. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Should be ending within the next 2 weeks. But if you don't want to know it, you better don't check the YouTube video of this as well.
You can say it. It's okay. Like,
no.
Don't make it too awkward on the stream.
No, I already was awkward.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Arena, what does Arena make is so special about it that makes your favorite map?
For me, it's the level of mind games that you can play. If you're walled in, so you can't really see what's going on. Otherwise, you can scout, but in Arena, more than any other map, you can kind of hide what you're going to do. And I've seen many Arena games where like you kind of try to follow the thought process of the player. Like you can kind of see him doubt, like, oh, should I go for a faster Imperial or should I go and push him? And if I'm pushing, at what point should I stop and just try to go to imp as fast as possible to get those trebuchets out to really, get an edge in that way. And that way of playing, that super tiny playing field, because that's also another thing. Arena is a very, very tiny map compared to any other map in the game. All the action is there, like all the mind games are there. That's what I really love about it. It's less micro intensive, I would say, despite the monk rushes that you often see there. It feels less micro intensive in a way. And that's why I also find it very interesting that on Arena, you have like a different set of top players compared to other maps. Like, okay, you have guys like the Viper, they're good on every map. You have this group of like top 10, top 20 players that are just good at every map. But you also have players like Eddie, who doesn't necessarily stand out on Arabia, but is really, really good in Arena. And
he performed amazing in this tournament, I heard. Don't want to spoiler.
Okay. and that's what I really love about this map. Like it's so different from the rest. And those mind games, just seeing, and also very important, you see monks and other units. Like the unit combinations are completely different. Like running around with cavalry archers on Arena is like, yeah, you don't really see that happening. So yeah, more units, more mind games, a lot of things to like about that map.
Yeah, that's true. It's a lot about decision making. And it's gonna love that. Some strategies we normally don't see, like Monk Rush, it's basically the only map where we ever see that really happening. And now Tower Rush has become pretty strong all of a sudden. And yeah, people have huge success with that. So that's interesting. And we'll have 2 more series coming up. And yeah, that's going to be interesting. And then we have 2 other tournaments. Let's start with the smaller one, I can spoiler that, I assume, because it is deathmatch. And we will have, those brackets here. We have the Viper and Shadow in the winner bracket finals against QuendyB. QuendyB actually quite a big surprise, I have to say, that they went that far in this tournament. And in the loser bracket, we have this week waiting Tyrant Warlords actually advanced against Zubenstock, so they will play, and Bunkbusters against QuendyA will happen. All are already in the money, and that's a pretty big tournament. And yeah, obviously Tado and the Vipers seem to be the big favorite at the moment. Oh, Zach disconnected, so I might need to reset your camera a bit, but we can work on that. And yeah, super, super exciting. The Viper and Tado, without the biggest of deathmatch experience, actually performing pretty damn well, not making a lot of DMers happy there. So let me try to adjust some of your camera work here. What are we seeing? That's pretty
that
weird.
Looks weird.
Yeah, it does. Here we have you. Interesting. Okay, good stuff. Okay, that's somewhat where, and we have just Stack over here. Okay, that makes a bit more sense now, and we are back. So looking forward to TLC. Rio Fire still in, me too, with Orkut and Rubenstock. We still have QuendyA, QuendyB, all fighting for the big title. That will end within the next 3 or 4 weeks. Actually, quite a bit of interest when we had probably the highlight so far. Zoomstock against Tyrant A. We had huge amounts of viewers as well. Mamp was streaming, C90 was streaming, Tado was streaming, I was streaming, and yeah, happy to see a lot of growth there. And then, probably talking about the biggest upcoming tournament, Battle of Africa, Cysion. Were your thoughts there? Are you following that? Do you know who signed up?
I did see the trailers. I have to say they were magnificently well done. So definitely props to Memp and team for that. I definitely want to watch the big matches for sure. It will depend on how much time I have outside of actually making Age of Empires games. But I didn't see. I saw some of the settings, and they looked interesting. There were some games played on Socotra, I think, which is like this super tiny map. That is usually a trushing map, so I'm kind of interested to see if they can find a better way to play that map. That will be very
you're spawning without stone in this version.
Oh, okay, there we go. Seems you already addressed my biggest concern there.
Yeah, exactly. So the option, I believe you're starting with like 30 or 40 stone or 20 stone, I believe, to build some outposts, but yeah, it's 20 stone because you need to buy stone twice to build a tower.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so that's pretty sweet. Maybe Saracens becomes an option there because it could be the best tower rush civilization then.
Yes, indeed. that would be a nice twist. Saracens OP. I am looking forward to the threads on Reddit and AoE season.
Yeah, potentially. So let's take a quick peek at the lineups here from the players that we already have. And yeah, probably the big favorite is indeed, well, what am I screwing up here? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. And is obviously Leary, Hart, MBL, Nikov. They seem to be the strongest civilization team at the moment, together with the Tyrants that don't have the highest rating. We will see about that. And then obviously SY is one of the big favorites. And Brazil, a lot of people having huge hopes for them. Fire the Gao, Miguel Rio, finally back together with an incredibly strong team. And yeah, that could be interesting. Maybe some teams that could maybe squeeze in the top 4 performance, the Finns, maybe China A. And this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, we will have a qualifying weekend for all those teams trying to make it into the top 8. Will be 5 weeks of Swiss format, followed by 2 weeks of bracket stage. So that's going to be a very interesting tournament. Probably the highlight of the next month for sure. And yeah, any predictions there? Do you have a favorite? Are you a fanboy of someone?
I always like it when players try to do a bit of weirder stuff, like outside of what is the meta. If I see Tato trying crazy stuff, I love that. He's one of those guys that absolutely dares to do the weirder things and experiment with the new civilizations. So anytime I see any of the new civilizations being used in a way that we didn't predict, that's what I love. I do mention Tato now, but obviously a lot of players experiment in that way. But I wouldn't say that I follow like a specific one or like am a fan of a specific one. But that kind of gameplay, game style of playing, love it.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, we could absolutely see that because it's so underdeveloped. People have so little idea on what to do. The big problem at the moment kind of is because the top players are making so much money off streaming that it's so much better for them to just keep streaming and play instead of have hidden rooms to like kind of prepare strategies against each other. That is something we have seen now, but if you compare it to like War is Coming, there was constantly Tyrant A against Tyrant B training against each other, hidden room, no spectators allowed, and they came up with the sharpest team strategies and executions you could think of.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm kind of questioning for this tournament.
Yeah, on the other hand, like for players, for viewers, just the fact that there is still this I would say big difference between knowledge of the new civilizations and how that plays out on the battlefield. Like I think that is also very interesting for viewers. Like you can see more experimental stuff rather than, I mean, you have two sorts of fans. Like some people go absolutely wild for seeing a perfectly executed Grush, and other people will be like, oh, not another Grush, even though it's perfectly executed. Some players just don't get excited for it anymore, and that could be an I think I actually see it more as an advantage for this kind of setup, like more spontaneous strategies. I hope, at least.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is also the good or bad thing is like we haven't seen any competitive games with the picking system for Battle of Africa. It will be the draft system. Every team picks 15 civilizations and you kind of have to fit them in the 5 maps you're going to play against your enemy. So we will really see how they work together, and obviously like how team bonuses work together. For example, the Malian bonus together with like condos. If you will suddenly have condos with +3 defense extra or +7 defense, or like Burmese condos with +7 attack, or whatever, Japanese condos, or how the team bonuses work together, it could be pretty interesting.
I would love to see a team game with Japanese, Burmese, Malians, and Gods for good measure, and that would just be brilliant.
Yeah, so sweet.
Then we're gonna see threats to rebalance the competition.
yeah, for sure. Okay, I think we are done with all those tournament threads, and I think now let's open it for the chat and give them a chance to ask some questions at Nearly AoE, so I can see what you're writing, or maybe Cysion, you want to address something before we go into the questions.
I think we're good for questions.
Okay, sweet stuff. Then let's see. I need to read them first. I often did the mistake to just start and read out the question, and in the middle of the question, I realized that is not a polite way to ask a question, and the question wasn't really clever. So let's see about that. And the flood starts. Do you think Portuguese need a buff for land maps?
Good question. They are definitely more water focused, even though they have this very general focus. This very general bonus of cheaper gold units, but that obviously applies to galleys, and that's why that bonus kind of swings both ways and actually more towards land maps. Water maps. On land maps, I definitely want to take another look at organ guns. They were a bit too strong in the past, then we nerfed them, then they were a bit too weak. I think we definitely want to revisit the organ guns. And other than that, one of our initial thoughts with Portuguese was like, how does their drush work out with cheaper gold? And yeah, we kind of need to see like how can we make that viable again? Because if they have a good drush, then all of a sudden you have a different civilization.
Yeah, but like the drush is only you need to take 1 gold instead of 10, right? It's I believe a militia costs 17 now, times 3 make 51. So, and that's not a big difference, 1 or 10, because
Exactly.
you need to walk and walk back. So if it's like instead of 15% cheaper, it's 16% cheaper, the drush becomes significantly better actually.
Exactly. But the problem also then you get with those generic bonuses is you can say, okay, we make it from 15 till, you can't really make 16. 16 is a bit weird. Do you go to 20? If you go to 20 cheaper on all gold units, that's like, wow.
Monks are even better. Yeah, knights, archers.
Yeah. So
tough.
That's tricky. We're definitely going to take a look at the organ guns. That's for sure. And after that, we will see.
Yeah. Are there any options for the Saracens start? Because that's their big problem. They don't have a really good eco bonus. I believe, what do they have? Like, market is 75 wood cheaper. Yeah, except that, like, what are options to still strengthen them?
The way Saracens kind of work is, I think, actually, they have one of the silliest team bonuses in the game, with their archers being better against buildings. If we throw that one a bit out of whack and say, like, rather than +3, let's make it +10, +30, whatever, just throwing out numbers, by the way, would that give them a completely different strategy? Can they actually try, like, go and walk around your houses and try to kill your houses and melt them down and kind of have an edge like that? Like, is something like that viable? I think you kind of have to play with that, because the market bonus, as it stands, we try to boost it with making the market cheaper. But in a way, they kind of play out like the Khmer. Like, you need a completely different build-up to really make them viable. And I think even if we would boost that too much or further, we easily get it to like, okay, this is too much, or this doesn't work, or people just don't want to do it because it's so different or too risky to pull off. So yeah, playing around with the team bonus could be an interesting one, actually.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe have like +2 as a team bonus and individually have +2 as well.
That is very possible. Like those kind of things, like we like to play with what exists in the game. And the problem there is that civilizations that were designed in a way are very different to change that way.
Or what about every unit has +2?
That
could be a strong M&A rush.
That would be. Oh, that's actually a very interesting thought there. Yeah.
I think we need to meet again.
You might be onto something. Yes.
We'll see. Yeah. They're interesting. At the moment, it feels like Saracens really suffered a lot from the camels and nerf. That they're like super bad facing halberdiers now.
Oh yeah, we're gonna revisit that one. The idea was good, but I would say we made a slight mistake there in some of the numbers. There were more. We put in higher numbers than we actually wanted to, or than we discussed. That was a slight mistake or miscommunication there. But yeah, we will address that.
Okay. That's also a very interesting thing, if you ever thought about that. But that's, I believe, something I need to talk with Microsoft about. The score system in Age of Empires, that the score is displayed. It's kind of nice for new players. You kind of know where you are. It's nice to have increasing numbers there. Like all the browser games nowadays are working with like rewarding effects of getting higher numbers. But for competitive play, it's actually bad that it shows those numbers.
Yes.
Is that something you're aware of and your team?
I'm very aware of that. Actually, the best example of that is, I would say, Arena. Because it's so much about mind games. But if all of a sudden there is a push going on in the Castle Age, and one player's score drops massively, you know, like, oh, he's going to the Imperial Age. There we go. And if you catch that moment, you know so much, even though you shouldn't be knowing that. So yeah, I'm very aware of that. It might actually be an interesting point. Like, do you want to hide that? Like, do you want an esports mode or like a competitive mode into the game, and you check it and scores are not visible at that point? Actually, we had in H1 a very similar problem. In H1, at any time during gameplay, you can call up the achievement screen. So you can see how many villagers the enemy has, how many soldiers, how many foods, woods, whatever he has gathered at that point. We, as FE, thought, coming from H2, we were like, wait, this is just cheating. This is not right. So we removed it. But then the competitive scene was like, no, this is H1. This is how it works. We don't have scouts in H1. We need something to go by. Otherwise, it's just playing blindly. And in the end, we put it back in because that was a valid point as well.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is crazy.
So weird.
If I watch, it is in a way distracting, because if I watch an H1 stream casted by a player, you constantly see that screen flickering up. And I'm like, I can't read it fast enough, but they can't, obviously. So it's like an epileptic intermezzo every 30 seconds.
That makes sense. I watched like 1 hour of my life of Age of Empires 1 stream, and it was the 3v3 deathmatch tournament of some Vietnamese guys on YouTube. And they were, first of all, they were super fast, which kind of shocked me. Like, honestly, I think they might be on the top level of the Korean StarCraft players. And yeah, they had a lot of weird moves. And I know that a lot of stuff happened that I didn't understand, and that could have been one of those kind. So that they see how much gold is the enemy mining, and that gives you so much intel.
Yes,
okay,
it does. Indeed, to your point of the score and that giving away information. I mean, I would be totally fine with it. I know the consequences. I know that it displays a lot of information that should not be displayed. But on the other hand, people are kind of using it. So would removing it cause issues? Like, would players like it or not? A beta. That's the only way to figure it out, really. Like, or make it optional. Like making a competitive mode, and if you select competitive mode.
When we played, how was it called? The Forgotten. I think you only called it the Forgotten at the start, right? You were including an esport version where you started with like 3 or 4 more villagers. I played that when you came over at the LAN.
Yes.
And yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Do you want to have an esport version included in the game?
So the way the esports version, as we called it back then, was basically the same thing as you have now, but you start with 10 villagers rather than 3. And the idea was that if you cast games, Dark Age is always, try to fill your time. Try to, nothing's happening in Dark Age usually. The first 5 minutes of game are usually completely the same. We wanted to get rid of that, move on to the action quicker, and that's why we introduced it. However, that has so many balance implications. and people initially didn't like it at all. So we reverted it quite quickly. It is still in the game in some form. If you play the special maps, they start with 10 villagers. So it's still kind of in the game for people who want it, but in general, it's out of there. I would still love it, but the amount of work and balance work that is involved, I'm not sure if it's even viable at this point with 30 plus civs that need to be looked at.
Yeah. Did you maybe by any chance follow one of my Clash of the Hippo tournaments?
I have seen a few of those, yes.
Where we started in feudal age with medium resources. So they instantly built a stable or an archery range and instantly started attacking, and was like action from like 90 seconds on.
Yeah.
And the games were, in my eyes, so much more entertaining. And I really love those. And yeah, I'm always patting my back with that. But I think that's a direction that, like, if you had full control over Age of Empires 1DE, is that something that you would like have like 3-4 guys, give them some money, give them some time, and tell them, I give you half a year, come back with an esport version?
Oh man, the problem is there that there is such an expectation in a way to keep things the way they are. We saw that with the Vietnamese community as well. Like one of the changes we did in H1DE is walkable farms. The Vietnamese community was not necessarily a fan of that. And yeah, increasing like the amount of villagers to make your start faster, or start with a scout, or increase the starting resources. In a way, I would love to do it, but on the other hand, I also realize that a lot of people see the appeal in the game for what it is, and they don't want to see that changed. And I think testament to that as well is that like a lot of changes usually take ages to be accepted, I would say, by the community. I've seen quite a few tournaments with experimental settings. I remember, this is way back, but I remember watching a game between Chris and Dowd. It was like Castle Age Start on some kind of Ensemble Studios map. And it was all experimental, but at the same time, it was like none of that ever caught on. And yeah, it will be tricky.
And it is kind of tough if you are the player and played 500 games of Age of Empires, and suddenly you want to see how are the best players in the world playing, and they aren't really playing the same. Where can you compare yourself? You cannot really identify. So I absolutely see the problem with settings like those. We kind of like, the idea has to be to have it more esports way and casual at the same time, and keep it in the way of like building an empire, Age of Empires style.
Yeah.
That's super tough. And yeah, hats off to every game developer.
Yeah, indeed. It's and I can't add anything to that, sorry.
yeah, it's tough. Question in the chat was, are you thinking about balancing or changing the monks in some way, balancing changes? Because like everyone is complaining whenever they get converted very quickly, like, why does that need to happen?
I would say the most we would do, okay, first of all, I think the monks are perfectly balanced as they are. There is this random factor, but I'm very much not I'm not tempted at all to touch them, to change them. However, if we would ever touch them, if there was really a popular request for that, I would bring the values, like the random values, like closer together. This is something that we did a lot in the random maps when the Forgotten came out. For example, there was a lot of variation in the boar distance, gold mining distance, deer patch variety. Those things, that randomness, we kind of brought down. I think in the original game, if you play Arabia, there's a chance of getting a patch of 3 deer or 4 deer. And that was random for each player. We made it that if the patch was 3 deer, it would be 3 deer for all players, or 4 deer for all players, rather than per player. So that's the most we would go. Like, we still keep the random factor there, but bring the values a bit closer, conversion range a bit closer.
But that's what you already did for monks. I believe it was like 7 to 13, like the second conversion, and it's now 9 to 11 or something. Or like it was 5 to 13 and it's now 7-11 or something. And like I think you cut off the edges at some point. I'm pretty sure about that.
I don't recall doing that, at least. If something changed in the random number generator, perhaps, but if so, it was not a change that I remember, at least.
Monk conversion change Age of Empires 2. Let me see. Maybe I'm right. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I will do more research because I was pretty sure. Oh, maybe I'm wrong. Okay. Well, you should know better. So yeah, I will trust you. I will trust you.
It's a fair point, anyways. Like if we would change monks, that's how we would do it. But the randomness is not going to completely go away unless Age of Empires 2 would really aim to be an 100% esports with $1 million tournaments, because then you don't want people to be complaining about like losing a game or losing $1 million because of 1 second in conversion time.
People will always complain.
Oh yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's
like
that's fair.
No matter what.
Yeah.
So okay, it has been a great episode. If you want to have any last words, I will give them to you.
Well, thanks for having me. It was very nice to be on your show. I like your show as well. I do try to catch it, even though I haven't caught every episode so far. I also really like the Clash of the Hippo tournaments, by the way. Lovely to see different kind of settings. And if everybody else in the chat or whatever has any questions, FE is still very much, I would say, part of the community. We are quite easy to reach. If you just send an email to our FE accounts, or you can find the contact page on our FE website. If you can find us on Reddit, on any social media, on Facebook, Twitter, whatever, we can reply to any questions you still have.
Okay, what's the best for you? Like email?
All of those really work. To be completely honest, we monitor all of them. The most direct is, of course, our website. We have a contact page there. But also do know, like, we get a lot of things there. We might not be able to reply instantaneously. Okay.
Then to wrap it up, what are your dreams? Not as a person, not at the head of as FE, but an Age of Empires fan. What are your dreams for, like, the next 3 years for the whole franchise?
Very, very, yeah. It's a bit tricky because we're also working on it. So,
well, just if you didn't know what you were doing during the day.
I don't know. Like, I think it's for the game to keep on surprising me in positive ways. The best thing about this game is that I've played this game in so many different ways. Like, I tried to play a bit competitive, wasn't very good at it, but at least I tried. I've played custom scenarios, I've played single player scenarios, campaigns, like everything. And the fact that it keeps on being refreshing is what makes this game so good and sticking around after all this time. So I hope that in the next 3 years it can kind of keep on surprising me like that.
Sweet stuff. Thank you so much, Bert, for being around. And as I said, I believe if it wasn't for you, we would have maybe one of those topics, if not even none. Probably none. Probably none.
I definitely. Okay, there's one thing I want to say on that one. Like there are so many more people, not just at FE, but in the community. Like all the people who stream games, all the people who still play it. The user batch team, very much the user batch team. Now Microsoft as well being involved, that are doing so much for the game to keep it alive. Like I'm part of the machine. Let's put it like that.
But you are a good wheel. Let's call it that.
All right. Well, whatever part, but I'm part of the machine.
Yeah.
Let's put it like that.
Would you love when Microsoft thinks, user patch team, you are great. Let's absorb you and take all the great things from you?
Sorry, come again. It's a bit noisy here.
Yeah. Sorry. Would it be great for Age of Empires and all the upcoming games if Microsoft would somehow absorb the user patch team? If they would be willing to do that?
That's a very interesting question. What the user patch guys did for H2 is beyond incredible, and what they did for FE as well, because without user patch and all the capabilities they provided for modding back in the days, FE and Forgotten Empires would never be possible. So I would say yes, absolutely. It's what he did in an unofficial capacity would definitely be magnificent in an official capacity, but it is not my call to make, of course.
Okay. Then thank you so much, Cysion. Time to wave. That's how we end the show. And
okay.
Yeah. Okay, not everyone has to wave. And yeah, thank you so much for being around. It was super insightful. And yeah, I hope we stay in touch, and I wish you all the best personally for FE, for Age of Empires 2 DE.
Yeah.
And for all the rest that you're working on as well. Have a great one.
Thank you very much, and see you around.